Why Perez is amazing at street circuits. One thing that you probably noticed about Perez is that he's very good when the F1 caravan visits city circuits. In his career, Perez has won the 2021 Baku GP, 2022 Monaco GP and Singapore GP, and has performed extremely well at every street circuit in his career. The question has to be asked, is Perez that good, or is the car setup something he manages to utilize the most when it comes to city circuits? The data says it all. If you compare Verstappen's qualifying performance at the traditional circuits, the Dutchman has an advantage of over 0.5% compared to Perez. However, Perez's performance on the street circuits when it comes to qualifying is better than Verstappen's by almost 0.1%. So, in order for us to understand why Perez is able to be a better driver on the street circuits, we have to understand the nature of the street circuits and what makes them different compared to the traditional layouts. What you already know is that street circuits are driven on everyday roads, meaning that these roads are used by pedestrians, regular cars, vans, trucks, etc. This means that this layout isn't perfectly suitable for F1 cars, which tend to be much faster and stabler on a smoother surface, one that is built especially for racing. Therefore, the challenge of controlling a car and driving it around a street circuit is much bigger if you compare it with the traditional circuit. On top of that, the road is much narrower compared to the traditional circuits. This means that the barriers are much closer to the road, practically glued down to the chicanes, meaning that the drivers have zero margin for error. At the Monaco GP, this characteristic is especially emphasized as the drivers are literally millimeters from the wall every time they pass the corners. Finally, it's worth mentioning that the street circuits are usually slower than the traditional ones. Of course, Baku GP has one of the longest deltas on the calendar at around 2 kilometers, and Jeddah GP is one of the fastest circuits on the track. But on the contrary, the average speed that the cars were achieving at the Monaco GP, the one that Perez won this year, was 122 kilometers per hour. This means that the drivers are spending more time on the brakes than the throttle. One thing you could think about is corner speed, but Perez hasn't been able to dominate that much in Jeddah, so that gives us the fact that this factor does not directly respond to why Perez is so good at street tracks. The nature of the corners is also something that makes you think whether or not Checo is able to utilize them much better than the rest of the grid. But when you compare Perez's qualifying lap in Monaco to Max's, his teammate, Perez is better for just a small amount of time, which is really inconsiderable when it comes to pure pace. When exiting a corner on a street circuit, it is critical to position your car properly. That is why Perez is mostly giving up on lap time by braking earlier, but positioning his car better and exiting the corner with more speed compared to Max. This is especially emphasized at the hairpin section of Monaco, where drivers are rhythmically hitting apexes in order to enter the next corner in a much better position compared to the rest of the grid, and therefore gain a significant amount of lap time. So you can say that Perez finds a lot of time in the straight line braking zones, entering the low-speed corners from the optimal position of the car. On top of that, Perez performed extremely well on the high-speed change of direction part of the track, which truly takes its toll on the driver's capabilities. Now, in order for us to better understand Perez's performance at the street circuits, we need to talk about Perez's performance at the regular circuits, such as Spa, Zandvoort and Monza. Spa was the first circuit where Perez's critique started to grow due to his performance, and the fact that his qualifying pace wasn't even able to match Sainz's really got people talking. Perez was outqualified by Verstappen by 0.8 of a second, which is a huge amount of time for any kind of driver to be outqualified by, let alone your teammate. Spa is a track that is a low downforce one due to the long straight sectors, and that is something that is very contrary to what Perez is used to dominating, such as the street circuits. So if you compare Perez's time with Max's at the Spa GP in 2022, you'll notice that the Mexican is losing quite some time at the medium speed corners, which the second sector is full of. The low-speed corners are either the same or going a bit in Perez's favor, while the delta sectors and the straight line ones are going in Verstappen's favor too. What we can extract from the Spa qualifying laps is that Perez is not very happy in corners that require the driver to have full trust in the car. This is why at one of the race's final corners, the slowest in Spa, Perez has lost 2 to 3 tenths of a second to Verstappen. This is a corner that the drivers are approaching at 310 km per hour, only to slow down to 70 km per hour in order to complete it successfully. This means that the front end of the car needs to be really strong, and the driver needs to understand how the car performs on these sectors of the track. That is something that Perez is likely lacking in Red Bull, and that is why he is losing such a huge amount of time compared to Max. If you compare the Monza qualifying lap, which is known as the Temple of Speed among the drivers, you'll notice that Verstappen has been able to out-qualify Perez by 9 tenths of a second. This is a track with only 11 turns, and all of them are either medium or high speed. What this effectively means is that the cars are pushing to the maximum when it comes to entering and exiting these corners, and the chart clearly shows that Verstappen is a lot quicker at the medium and high-speed corners, as well as the straight-line sectors of the track. Perez was only quicker at the low-speed corners, which seemed to be his thing. One thing that can be concluded from the Monza GP is that Perez seems to like putting more front end on the car at the apex of the corner. Still, Perez ran the car with lower downforce than usual, meaning that what he tried to achieve isn't really achievable with that car setup. But if the team added a front wing that would suit Perez's needs to the low-speed corners, the rest of the track would have been a disaster for him, as that wing would have been truly useless at the straight line and medium-speed corners. There are some other factors that can be brought to light when it comes to Checo's performance on the street circuits. The Monaco GP was much earlier in the 2022 season, and at that time Verstappen was constantly complaining about how the car just wasn't at the place he would have wanted it to be. This probably means that Perez was just able to deliver a much better performance with that version of the car, and combined with his ability to deliver at street circuits, you have the win in Monaco. As the season progressed, Red Bull seemed to have evolved the car to have more front end, meaning that the driver would have to be more aggressive with the car in order to deliver better performance. That is exactly what Verstappen did, and that is exactly what Perez wasn't able to follow as the season passed by, all the way up to Singapore. The general opinion, and likely the opinion that would describe the Red Bull 2022 season the best, is that Verstappen is able to drive anything as long as it's sharp and predictable. Although his driving style is very similar to Perez's when it comes to entering corners and exiting them, as both of them are giving lap time at the entrance of the corner just to exit it faster and with a more stable car, Verstappen's confidence in the car is something that Perez is hugely lacking. That has been pointed out by Perez on multiple occasions as the season was passing by, and that is something that Red Bull needs to address in the remainder of the 2022 season if they want to have a second driver that is much closer to Max. With that being said, Perez's ability to perform on city circuits is truly a blessing for the team, given the fact that the F1 Caravan will visit another street circuit in 2023 in Las Vegas. However, that wouldn't be enough for Perez to keep second place on the grid, as he needs to find a better groove with the car on low downforce tracks and be as close to Max as possible. What do you think about Perez's performance on the street circuits? Let us know in the comments below.